So, the big question to ask, is this research or is this the practice of medicine? Now, to most people that seems really clear. That seems like a very easy question to answer. Unfortunately, that becomes more complicated. So for example, what if I want to test a drug on myself? If I want to biohack myself, is that research? Is that practice of medicine? What if I have a single patient who's asking me as a clinician to give him or her a treatment? Is that research? Practice of medicine. What if my patient asks for that treatment and then I want to publish the results? Research? Practice of medicine. What if I give it to that patient and it works and I want to give it to another patient? What if it's, instead of just one patient, I want to give it to all my patients? And what if I want to publish the results, get other doctors to try it on their own patients? Is that research or practice of medicine? Stay tuned. Which one are you?
This is the Darshan Talks podcast. Regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.
So let's sort of talk a little bit about each one of those. Research is a systematic investigation, including research, development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. And that's the key piece, generalizable knowledge. Activities that meet this definition constitute research for purposes of this policy, whether or not they're conducted or supported under a program that is considered research for other uses. What are the implications of research? You need to register. You may need to have IRB oversight, and you may need to have other oversight, things like monitors and the like. On the other hand, and I'm going to just pick on California because it's one of the largest states, any person who practices or attempts to practice or who advertises or holds himself out as practicing any system or mode of treating the sick or afflicted in this state, or who diagnoses, treats, operates for, or prescribes for any ailment, blemish, deformity, disease, disfigurement, disorder, injury, or other physical and mental condition of any person, without having at the time of doing so a valid, unrevoked, or unsuspended certificate as provided in this chapter, essentially is practicing medicine. The question being, which one are you? You would think that that's a simple enough question to answer, but it's not. The key piece being the generalizable knowledge. In the case of medicine, you're dealing one-on-one with patients, and if it's on label or off label, it could still be the practice of medicine. When you start using that off label for generalizable knowledge without doing the appropriate testing, that's considered off label prescribing, and that's still allowed if it's one-on-one. On the other hand, if it's used and you're trying to make generalizable claims about it, that might be research and may need oversight. So a really good way to judge whether it's research or practice of medicine is to start looking at intent. So clinical research is answering specific questions through research involving numerous research volunteers. On the other hand, medical treatment is intended for the needs of individual patients. The intended benefit for clinical research are future patients. On the other hand, medical treatment is for the current patient. Clinical research is often paid for by drug developers or government agencies. On the other hand, medical treatment is funded by individual patients and their health providers or the health plans. The time frame, the clinical research will depend on the protocol itself. On the other hand, medical treatment requires real-time decisions. Consent, clinical research requires informed consent. Medical treatment may or may not require informed consent. Assessment, clinical research involves periodic and systematic assessment of patient data. Medical treatment is based on as-needed patient assessments. On the other hand, for protections for clinical research, it's protected by government agencies, IRBs, professional standards, informed consent, and legal standards. On the other hand, for medical treatment, you're guided by the state boards of medicine, professional standards, peer review, informed consent, and legal standards. Clinical research tests products and procedures of unproven benefit to the patient. On the other hand, medical treatment uses products and procedures generally regarded as safe and effective by the medical community. Clinical research often includes confidential intellectual property, while medical treatment is available to the general public through the product labeling. And lastly, clinical research is published in medical journals after the clinical research ends. medical treatment is not generally, the individual medical records themselves are not generally released to the general public. Now remember, these distinctions come into play because it matters depending on the intent of how you're using the product. If you're biohacking, you may not be either, because there's no treating physician. On the other hand, if you're a physician providing a biohack, that may very well expose you to claims of medical treatment or clinical research, depending on your intention. Which one are you? Let's look at some of those earlier considerations, see which one would... So if you went to biohack yourself, would that be medical treatment or clinical research? If I'm biohacking myself with no intent for generalizable research, I have a stronger argument for medical treatment. If I'm doing it to myself, I may not be subject to either. If a doctor's helping me, it may be medical treatment. On the other hand, if the doctor's putting it into generalizable research, again, there are claims that it might become more research or generalizable information. On the other hand, if the patient wants me to give him or her a treatment and it works and I want to start using it on other patients, or I want other doctors to start using it as well, then that might be more research than an individual treatment. And obviously there are variations, and each one of those would have its own meets and bounds. Stay tuned, subscribe, listen. We'll have more coming up for you. Thanks, guys.
This is the Darshan Talks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.